welcome. The rule of the game is very simple. Please keep eating, keep enjoying your food, but you can no longer talk and you cannot use your phones anymore. And if you need to make any airline reservation, we have a booth at the end. You can do it then, but not now. Let me mention that if I were to tell you that I'm going to start an airline industry today, you are going to tell me you are completely out of your mind. And in some ways, you would be right. But an entrepreneur, an innovator, a risk taker is not going to look at the past. We were talking about it, Dave and I were looking at it. We are not going to look at history as predictor of the future, because if you innovate, you are creating ex nihilo, you are creating from scratch. And in many ways, that's what we are going to listen to today with Dave. The innovations that JetBlue is, that he embodies, and my job is not to introduce him, but my job is to tell you that we just spent half an hour together, and I was very excited by his vision, and in fact I realized something, that in fact he is in our business, in the business of education and the business of people. And in many ways that Northeastern has announced recently that we are going to open and various regional campuses, and we will be the first university in the nation to have a nationwide system. Now, we did it for a simple reason, because we saw a gap. Our undergraduate education will always be here. Our research and PhD programs will be focused here. But there is an enormous need throughout the nation for post-BA, BS education at the graduate and professional master's level. Only 10% of those who went to a university and have a college degree have now a master's degree or beyond. Now, when we live in a period of knowledge explosion, when you have new fields being created, when people need to retool, when executives need to get to know not only new emerging fields, but also to update themselves, there is very little that can be done. And this is why we have decided to step in and open these regional campuses, the first in Charlotte, the second in Seattle, and we're looking at other cities. And we are going to provide this training online from Boston and on-site in these locales. In order to do that, we have to beef up our human competence, which means that we are recruiting 300 new faculty. And in a period of retrenchment, when higher education is frozen or is not moving forward, there's a retrenching, we saw this as an opportunity to move forward and to take advantage of an enormous gap. And that's what we have been doing. And this is a preamble to tell you that I am going to move from being the president of Northeastern to being the CEO of JetBlue, and ask Dave now to take this vision and make it a reality, because he has a better track record than mine. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is David Heffron, and I'm the chair of the aviation practice at WilmerHale. On behalf of WilmerHale, I want to thank you for joining us today. We're proud to sponsor the CEO Breakfast Forum, along with our co-sponsor, Deloitte. I'd like to express our thanks to Northeastern for arranging this event and for providing us with the opportunity to hear from CEOs of some of the most successful companies. Our speaker today is no exception to that impressive list of CEOs. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you the President and Chief Executive Officer of JetBlue Airways, Dave Barger. Dave is an original founder of JetBlue, an airline known for its low fares and admired for its innovative, high-quality service. Dave joined JetBlue in 1998, became a member of the company's board in 2001, and has served as its Chief Executive Officer since 2007. Dave is an airline industry veteran, having served in senior management positions at Continental Airlines, and before that with New York Air. Aviation is in Dave's blood. His father was a United Airlines pilot for 37 years. Under Dave's able leadership, JetBlue has become an industry leader and a brand that's synonymous with excellent customer service. Since JetBlue's debut flight in 2000, its operations have expanded to over 60 destinations in the US and internationally. JetBlue has distinguished itself in the marketplace, deftly managing its way through major economic shifts, including the recent recession. It was one of the few US airlines that made a profit during the sharp downturn in the airline travel following the 9/11 attacks that were so devastating to the airline industry. JetBlue just reported another profitable quarter and has become the largest carrier at Boston Logan International, with plans to continue expanding in this key market. Given that the addition of any new service, air service, at an airport can generate millions of dollars in economic value for a community, JetBlue's contribution to the Boston area economy has been truly substantial. But JetBlue's success is not just evidenced in terms of its financial reports. Among the many awards JetBlue has received, it's ranked as a 4-star low-cost carrier by Skytrax, and is the only US airline to be ranked above 3 stars. JetBlue was also recently ranked highest in customer satisfaction among low-cost carriers in North America by J.D. Power and Associates for the 7th year in a row. Dave is a graduate of the University of Michigan and a supporter of the school's Barger Leadership Institute. He's also a leader in terms of his philanthropy. He serves on the executive committee and the board of governors of Pencil, which is a nonprofit organization devoted to improving public education in New York City. And he's a co-chair of Generation On, which is an organization dedicated to helping young people get involved in their communities. Dave's also a leader in the broader aviation community. He serves as the chair of the FAA's Next Gen Advisory Committee, which is a key program for the FAA and for the industry. He's on the executive committee and board of governors of the Flight Safety Foundation, and he's a past president of the Wings Club. Please join me in welcoming Dave Barger.
Good morning. David, thank you so much for that kind introduction. Very much appreciate that, and absolutely delighted to be in Boston today. And President Aoun, thank you. Joseph, thank you for the kind words as well. It sounds like we're going to be trading places, right? And so, yes, we'll be trading places, yes. And so tomorrow you'll have to be heading to Liberia, Costa Rica, for our inaugural flight, right? Because I'm scheduled to be on that, right? And so you'll have to take that trip. And where am I supposed to be tomorrow?
Singapore.
Singapore. I don't know. Can we make that happen? That's kind of a quick trip. Well, absolutely delighted to be here today. And again, David, thank you for the kind words. Joseph as well. Thank you for the invitation. Honored to be here today at the Northeastern University CEO Breakfast Forum. I know there's not many of these over the course of the year, 3 I understand, and so absolutely delighted to be here. And as I think about spending time here in Boston, by the way, it's we'll show you a couple slides. We're not going to PowerPoint you to death. You've been in those kind of settings, but I think maybe a couple backdrops just to share what we've been doing and how we're looking at the world, a little bit of discussion on Washington as well. But I just have to tell you, spending time last week in Boston for a couple of days, with their investor meetings. A considerable amount of our shares are owned up here in Boston with what's happening with Logan and Massport. David Mackey, Ed Freni, I know you're here as well today. It's where are you both? Hey, there you, right there. There you go. Thank you so much for your support as well. And David, I know I'm going to see you down in New York as well next week. It's just always great to be in your just super town. When we think about Boston, we think about education, we think about technology, we think about vibrancy, and our brand over time has really had some tremendous traction here since we started flying in the year 2004. And January of 2004, it's just hard to believe what's happened over that course of time. And now as we fast forward today, and I'll with a closing slide, we'll show you a neat picture that we had at Logan Airport. We're now over 2,000 crew members, our word for employees, here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and supported by just a terrific group of people. And Ian Deason, if you could stand, and we have JetBlue crew members at your table. Ian's our director of the Boston operation. Stay standing. How about the Boston team, if you could please stand and be recognized. Really appreciate the support. It's when we look at our operation out at Logan, and we touched 100 flights over the course of the summer, and we call it a Boston 150 program. We're really excited about what that means with our growth, our investment here in the community, and creating jobs, right? And maybe a word that we're looking for across the United States. And so it's really nice to see with our Boston operation. By the way, as we add new fares as well, we recently added service down to Newark Airport. And isn't it interesting when all of a sudden you have competition on a route and the fares are reduced by 75%? 75% in terms of a walk-up fare, and so it's nice to see that competition, the stimulation, what happens with traffic in and out of Logan Airport. That's more Dunkin' Donuts coffee being drank at the right, Clayton, at the airport. It's amazing. It's parking, it's food, it's beverage, it's specialty retail, it's dwelling, and it's neat stuff with what happens. Now, as we are now approaching our 12th anniversary, and that will begin. We'll celebrate that February 11th of next year, and really excited about doing that. It's Joseph, as you mentioned this, I loved our conversation this morning because by definition, innovation is forward thinking, as opposed to certainly looking at history, but you have to be forward looking. And it was very interesting to hear about your international expansion and the co-op brand that you're putting forth. And as you know, if you've experienced our flying, and by the way, who's flown with us? Can I see? Wow, everybody has. I'm not going to ask who had a bag delayed or who was on a delayed flight. Right, well, I won't ask that. But doing things differently, we'll close the year with 169 aircraft. And as we talk about things like satellite television and satellite radio and soon connectivity with our Viasat partnership next year. It's amazing to think that a satellite launched from Kazakhstan less than a month ago, built in Palo Alto by Space Systems Loral, will sit, it's now geopositioned 22,500 miles in space south of the equator below Tucson, Arizona. And that will drive your connectivity, that broadband, into the airplane. And it's still, when you think about how complex that is, it still amazes me when somebody says, you know, it's where's my connectivity? I just lost the connection. and you think about how Palo Alto, Moffett Field, fly this thing to Kazakhstan, launch it in space. Anyway, it's amazing with what's happening, and we just take this for granted. But it's the in-flight entertainment. It's things like assigned seats. It's no overbooking. It's a comfortable aircraft. And as we talk about just great people, many of them here today, also with the simulcast, it's just terrific to be able to say 14,000 crew members, again, our word for employee, now supporting what we're doing. And today, as we announce service to La Romana in the Dominican Republic, the president will be down in Costa Rica tomorrow to Liberia. Soon, St. Thomas and St. Croix will have 70 destinations across our footprint by the time we close the year. And that's just in the first 12 years, and now selling to 6 different continents with our airline partnerships as well. And this is what's interesting as well. And as we talked about over breakfast this morning, this industry, first flight, Orville and Wilbur, 1903, 1914, somebody bought a ticket flying from St. Petersburg to Tampa. Fast forward to today. When you take 98 years worth of selling tickets for attempting to make a profit in the United States, the industry has not been profitable on an aggregated basis. And so, by definition, we have to be doing things differently. And whether it's financially, whether it's the product side of the equation, or whether it's certainly the cultural side of the equation, it's just something that we believe at our core is we have to keep fighting against the tide because the history books, the pull of history is just too strong. And so when we look at even the decisions that we've made for the next 10 years, this picture right here of an Airbus A321, this is a newest aircraft in our fleet, or it will be. We'll start to see this aircraft in the year 2013, the latter part of 2013. So if you think about the JetBlue experience with the Airbus A320, and by the way, the Airbus is about 7.7 inches wider than Boeing. And the smaller aircraft, we have the Embraer. The seats are even wider on that airplane than the Airbus aircraft. And so, again, this customer experience, doing things differently. This is 190 seats in our configuration. The ability to fly to Fort Myers with maybe 2 trips instead of 3 trips, to go see the Red Sox spring training at JetBlue Park. Little advertisement. Think about the environmental advantage of 2 aircraft flying the route instead of 3. And when we start to take a look at new engines on this aircraft in 2017, and also winglet technology, 15% improvement in fuel burn. So pretty significant when you start talking about the combination of the economy, so stimulating traffic, lower fares, plus the power of energy, and maybe a reduction in the use of energy, and oh, by the way, the byproduct of the environmental side of the equation, so pretty significant. You'll start to see this aircraft here at Logan in the end of 2013, and I believe in a hangar as well with support, with more jobs being added here in the same time frame. Now that, all that said, we've had a lot of fun over the course of the first 12 years, and Nani, you asked the question about the challenges of what we face going into the future. And if I may, just to talk a little bit about politics, and maybe in the classroom, in the educational setting, President, with bringing you inside the huddle from an airline perspective about our challenges. Let me start with first taxes. And it's absolutely amazing when you start to take a look at the aviation business. We're leading all industry in 2 measures. And first of all, we have the largest number of taxes, 17 of them in all, that are added into the price of a ticket versus any other industry that's selling goods and services in the United States. And we'll show you a little bit of an insight into that slide here in a moment. So when you think about this, we're taxed at levels, and I'm not complaining, these are facts. We're taxed at levels such as alcohol and tobacco. We're taxed more than either one of those items. And when you think about it, in the United States, these are products that are taxed to discourage their use. Think about that, to discourage their use. And so when you think about a $300 ticket and the taxes that go into the price of that ticket, $61, over 20% of the price of that ticket, you see in terms of taxes. And what's happening today, as part of the deficit reduction, there are 2 proposals on the table. And I had a discussion with Senator Kerry on this last week, and on Veterans Day, and respecting, I mean, what a great day for our country, respecting what's happening. It was in Washington, had a telephone conversation with them last Friday. There's now a proposal to add a $100 departure tax on every commercial flight that's using the airspace system. It doesn't sound like a big deal, right? 100 people on an Embraer, 150 people on an Airbus A320. It's $1 per enplanement, maybe less than $1 per enplanement on the bigger aircraft. All the different airlines operating different gauge. There is no doubt that elasticity, when you start to add taxes, when the price of a ticket is up $1, $5, $10, you can absolutely see what transpires in terms of demand. Now, this one charge in the next 10 years in the United States, according to the Air Transport Association, which we're part of, it's our lobbying group down in Washington, is expected to add $10 billion worth of additional expense into the airline industry. And you remember this 98 years worth of history? Not being profitable? So let's knock down the deficit with the 18th tax tied into aviation. Well, there's another proposal. And in discussions with Senator Kerry on the super committee, and this is not only the doubling of the 9/11 security tax, but the tripling of the 9/11 security tax. And this gets pretty personal when you think about our industry, which was utilized as a vehicle of terrorism, and we're being taxed $2.50 every time you get on an airplane, doubling that to $5, tripling that in 2017 to $7.50 to reduce the deficit, not to enhance aviation security, to reduce the deficit. And this is pretty amazing when you start to get inside of really what's happening in Washington, D.C. So, Nani, I think that these challenges of taxes. Aviation, commercial aviation drives $1.2 trillion in annual economic activity. That's annual economic activity. Supporting the local economies, the national economy, we create new markets, driving economic development. And in fact, when we think about new fees and taxes levied against airlines, we actually believe that aviation will, when we start to see the number of jobs that have been created and the hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been lost just in the last 10 years, the number is quite staggering. When you start to forecast what that could do to, certainly what that could do to our country, what it could do to our industry. And when you start to think about profit margins, this is a very low profit margin business. And this is the second point with businesses. So we lead goods and services sold. We're number one in terms of being taxed. By the way, we're number two when it comes to margins out of the top 25 industries in the United States. And with very, very low margins, and a lot of it tied into things such as our number one cost, oil. Number two cost is labor. Oh, by the way, somewhere in there are airplanes and landing fees and rents and charges and what have you. But it's pretty amazing when you think about what taxes could do to really the impact of our industry. And this just gives you a feel. And this happened to be, this is a round trip Peoria to Raleigh. Travel, think about Boston down to Charlotte, think about flying down to Raleigh for the day and the taxes that are associated. This is a $300 ticket, right? Some of these taxes are layered in based on what the price of the ticket is. It's not just a fixed amount. And so when you start to add in the $100 departure tax, the 9/11 security tax, doubling, tripling, et cetera, well, I think you get the story. And so this is something that I certainly wanted to use today's breakfast to share a little bit of insight with some of the challenges that we're seeing from the standpoint of deficit reduction coming out of Washington, D.C. Now, all that said, let's talk about a second topic as well, and this is representative of our air traffic control system. So another challenge that we have, and you may not know that the satellite-based technology that, we have in our telephones, we use in our cars, for the most part, that's not how we're navigating. That's not how we're really moving aircraft from not just A to B. We tend to go from A to C to D to E to F, and somewhere in there we get back to B because of the old beacon navigation system that was set up years ago. And there is no place more congested in the world than the airspace located between Washington, D.C. and Boston, and in the middle of New York, our home base of operations. And it's pretty staggering. 20% of all the commercial traffic that flies today in the world will transit, 20% will transit the airspace here in the Northeast corridor. Now that's just the shuttle flights. It's also, it could be Amsterdam to Houston, but it's flying through our airspace. That somebody has to handle that airspace. So think about this congestion. Now it's going to be changing with what's happening in China, what's happening in India, what's happening in the Middle East, Latin America with growth, but 20% of all the traffic is flying through our airspace. And so we talk about the next generation air traffic control system. So Nani, we think about, here's number two, right, with how do we get the government to move forward? How do all of us as business leaders start to talk about investment? My gosh, you see this at school. You see this in this area. You have Raytheon, Bill Swanson, who's going to be addressing the club as well in the future here at the Northeastern breakfast. And this is very, very significant to say the least. This enhancement of moving airplanes with satellite technology, I'm really quite honored to be chairing the Next Gen Advisory Committee, a federally established committee. We have volunteers that consist of basically 30 industries, including the FAA, including people like Eurocontrol and others. How do you move airplanes from A to B in an efficient manner? And I'm actually quite excited about how do we move forward with this, but the price tag is rather interesting. Price tag starts to look like $40 billion plus. And so in a deficit reduction environment, how do you start to see technology taking place? And many of the airplanes, by the way, they're equipped. It's the fact that the ground-based systems are not equipped. It's not a human factors issue with controllers. Everybody wants to use the technology to move airplanes. But this is a second challenge that we're seeing, certainly out of Washington, D.C. as well. And I just wanted to share this insight this morning. The advisory committee, we're moving forward on things like topics like metroplexes. Great, the technology is available. There's enough science, right? We're using it in our cell phones, right, in our iPads, iPhones. So metroplex, who gets it first? Productivity measures. If you put it in place, is there less elapsed time to fly from A to B? Are you starting to see productivity measures? Recently, I collected some data from American Airlines flying a propeller in 1957 between Boston and New York. That was a 53-minute flight in 1957 in propeller aircraft. And what we saw in 2011, that's 1 hour and 35 minutes in a jet aircraft. Think about that. Better technology. Yeah, and we've done some of that to ourselves with overscheduling with airlines. Propeller aircraft was quicker back in 1957 when you think about fast forward over 54 years, I think the lack of a national focus when we talk about our transportation infrastructure program. If people talk about infrastructure, if you could, please talk about technology. It's not just roadways and bridges. It's not just runways and ports. It's also technology and what's above us. And as we think about what that means, the benefits. Think about the economic benefits because we're driving more throughput. Think about the energy benefits because we're flying more efficiently from A to B in less minutes elapsed, right? And then you think about the environmental impact because we're producing less emissions as a result of flying from A to B. And so when you think about what's happening across the world, when you get off the airplane next time you fly to Singapore, which I'm doing tomorrow, I understand, or Incheon at Seoul, or over in Shanghai, or Beijing, or wherever the case might be. By the way, Beijing will have a new airport in less than 6 years, and they haven't even started yet. And you think about what it takes us to do in terms of investing in infrastructure. Well, do think about next gen, help us, if you will, talk about using technology. You see it, we're using it every day in terms of driving enhancements. Well, I couldn't take the stage here without talking about Tarmac delays. And I won't ask if anybody saw what happened down in Hartford a couple of weeks ago, but very seriously and in a transparent manner, when you think about what did transpire, listen, we own what happened at Hartford on October 30th. But let me give you a little bit more of the rest of the story. And I called the Secretary of Transportation and I apologized, as I did to the FAA administrator, for what transpired in Hartford. We were in the news in 2007, if you may have seen that story, as well, with what transpired with tarmac delays. However, what you don't know, or the other issues that may not have played yet are, well, we're relying upon that technology. And so we're the largest airline at Kennedy Airport. And when you take down one of the runway navigation aids for preventative maintenance on the Friday going into what's going to be a snowstorm, okay, there must be a good reason for it, and we knew that. But when the snow started in the New York area, and then we lost nav aids at the overflow runway, and Newark also lost runway aids, navigation aids, and all of a sudden, we're starting to fly with an awful lot of aircraft in this part of the world. There's some issues tied into the activity diverting into Montreal, into Boston, into Logan. Also some interesting airplanes that made their way to Logan, like A380s, and also bringing back troops from Libya, et cetera. It's pretty interesting with the dynamics. All of a sudden, we ended up with diversions at Hartford that number 29 aircraft. We had 6 of them. And so when you start talking about gridlock, when you start talking about the lack of infrastructure to handle that many airplanes that quick, that literally made their way into a place like Hartford in 120 minutes, it's really unfortunate with what transpired. And we own it. We had customers on an airplane. But I have to tell you, I think our team has done an awful lot talking with the Secretary and the FAA and people in Washington regarding when an airplane diverts or airplanes divert, you have to help support us. And if international aircraft are coming in from Paris, such as they were that day, you have to have Customs and Border Patrol available to help take customers off airplanes. Because if one airplane can't unload, the next airplane's blocked. By the way, snow also prevented the fueling system from working, the de-icing system from working as well. when the rain turned to snow. And I just, at the end of the day, we sit here and we talk about, again, Washington. Love Washington in many ways, right? This deregulated industry that's highly regulated. Taxes, next generation air traffic control system, Tarmac Delays. There was a fine issued with an airline in Chicago yesterday, $900,000. It's not so much the amount of money. I can't tell you the empathy, the pain, the disappointment, the anger that I felt, right? Because this transpired for us and other airlines, and it's the industry. Take the logos off your chest. It's just, we've got to work better. We've got to work collectively. We've got to collaborate. There's got to be somebody calling the shots when something like this happens. And because I think what happens, people see a headline like this, or you might read about us as the largest airline at Logan, and it's like, wow, what are those guys doing? And please know that we take it very seriously. It's a black eye for us, but at the same time, we want to take advantage of what did happen to improve the industry overall for all of us here in the United States. Not unlike, say, investing in infrastructure or making the price of a ticket reasonable so that more people are on airplanes driving economic impact as opposed to being here solely for deficit reduction. I'll close with this, and I know we're going to go to some questions. Bill, we've got a couple Twitter questions as well, and which would be fun using technology. This picture, Ian and team, we happen to have, this is our 100th Airbus A320, and with the support of the FAA and Massport, this picture was taken from their facilities in celebration of reaching 100 flights this past summer. And when we start to take a look at 2,000 plus crew members, our flight activity, our growth plans, by the way, growth plans also being respectful to the rest of the community. You want choice. You want many airlines flying here for competitive advantage. We're young. We've only been here going on 12 years. There's airlines that have been here with leases for decades. We respect that. We just want to be part of what we're doing on a go-forward basis for the long term, and very much appreciate the support of all of you, and really Ian and team at the Logan operation. Hopefully we'll have an invitation to talk about what's happening with Boston 150 in the not too distant future, call it 3 to 5 years down the road. So on behalf of our entire organization, I'm absolutely delighted and honored to spend time talking about JetBlue, talking about some of the challenges we have, and I look forward to your questions. But Mr. President, as you make your way to Costa Rica and I go to Singapore, we're honored to be here today, spending time with Northeastern University at the breakfast gathering. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I think we're going to have the first question from the room, right, Bill? And then we'll follow up with Twitter. And I think the only thing I would ask, because we're being simulcast, is if you could make your way up to the microphone. And can you make your way to the microphone just so we can also get you on the video as well? And just introduce yourself. And Bill, you'll let us know how much time we have for Q&A. That'd be great. Yes, sir.
My name's John Gaber.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, John.
You have an alliance with American Airlines, so I'm curious as to what your take is on their future and why the pilots union is being unrealistic in their negotiations.
Yeah, very good, John. Thank you. It's a by the way, it's alliance is an interesting word. We have a partnership with American Airlines, and words are important because there are alliances such as One World, Star, SkyTeam. And we have an open architecture. We partner with many airlines, including American Airlines. Interesting with the pilots, as David mentioned, my dad was a pilot with United for 37 years, and it's like, wow, I learned a lot about pilot psyche, to say the least, kind of watching that. And maybe for a different conversation. American Airlines is a great brand, and they've been around for decades. Right, you start talking about the longevity. And it's obviously a question I think that's probably best put to the leadership team at American Airlines, but from on the outside looking in, what we've learned with our company, from a cost structure perspective, you have to be efficient. You have to be productive. Whether that's labor costs, benefits, whether it's how many hours per day you're flying the airplane, how many times per day you use EDS gates, whatever the case might be, you have to be productive and efficient. And again, on the outside looking in, we look at an airline like American Airlines, who is really attempting to compete at a global level against airlines that are now the product of mergers and bankruptcies. And so, all legal, but you have to compete against that cleansed balance sheet. You have to compete against that new cost structure. When you look at the new United, you look at the new Delta. So I think that American Airlines, lots of longevity, and there's going to continue to be many years in the future for American Airlines. The partnership has been very good for us. We have a lot of traffic that's connecting across places like New York, Boston, connecting from New Orleans to, say, Logan to London Heathrow Airport. And that number is driving north. And John, it's what happens with American Airlines, and you kind of read the press releases and the pilots union and, accepting what's happening with compensation. I'll close with this. As we spend time with our crew members, right, our labor groups, it's we want to be peer competitive, but it's got to be sustainable. It has to be. Because if it's not sustainable, and you look at the history books again, there's been plenty of increases. I'll benchmark here. I'll pay you $1 more than that benchmarking over there. Marty, you remember that. Marty, who one of our senior officers, when you were at United Airlines, in terms of United and Delta and some of the comparisons with pilot compensation. Transparency, and it's got to be sustainable. And we're on the sidelines waiting to see what's going to happen. But no matter what happens, we continue to plan on partnering with American for a long time. It's been very good for our company. Appreciate the question, John. I think we're going to Twitter next, right? Twitter, and then we'll come back to the room. Great.
Okay, so we're streaming this live. We're trying something new today. We're streaming this live on the Northeastern website, which is pretty innovative. And I'm not sure what college students up at 8 o'clock in the morning are listening to this. But that being said, we got this figured out. And so we're getting lots of questions coming in that I think came in last night as opposed to this morning. But nonetheless, the first question, Dave, is, and appropriate, how has social media changed the way that JetBlue approaches customer service?
So, Bill, it's so I'm at David J. Barger. That's my Twitter handle. And Brian Baldwin, our corporate communications, right, Brian? We've got 1.7 million Twitter followers. And we look at Facebook, and over 500,000 Facebook aficionados or followers as well. And I think it's really from the standpoint of it's real-time communication. It's service recovery. And it has been, I would say, almost a first mover advantage for the company because of our ability to really get our message out, but if not more important, somebody real time saying this is what's happening. By the way, sometimes it could be with, I'm in Hartford, and you're getting some real time information, or the following security issue is going on at an airport, we can't get through a checkpoint, or I'm trying to get rebooked onto an airplane. So social media for us, it has definitely been a terrific advantage, first mover. Marty, I think about how you use Twitter and how your team communicates across our company, extending, our schedule, and all of a sudden people going online to book the flights because we're now outselling into mid-2012. Flight announcements like today with opening a new service, it's been just absolutely terrific. I use it for professional purposes. Occasionally I'll talk about the Detroit Tigers or something like that, or University of Michigan. But I think by and large, it's part of our DNA, and it's going to be there for a long time. Bill, thank you. Appreciate it. Question in the room, please.
My name is Priscilla Douglas. I love JetBlue, and I want you to talk about the JetBlue blue chips and the fact that your crew members always seem to enjoy cleaning up. How do you make that happen?
I love it, Priscilla. Thank you so much. It's first of all, the snacks on board the aircraft. It's the blue chips, right? Which is our most expensive snack on board the aircraft. And I won't use this pulpit to try to drive the price down, but it's been signature to the company. And when we look at the ability to, the difference being, instead of coming through the aisle with a cart, in the early days, let's don't do a cart. People get blocked by the cart. Let's do the basket. Let's use our crew members from a branding perspective, presence. You want a full can of Coke or soda or whatever the case might be? Here's the full can. How much ice do you want? As opposed to I'm going to figure out how much ice you want. And then you get into the snacks. And the blue chips just kind of hit early on with snacks that the branding was just super. And it's amazing. We took them off. And the feedback that we've got, Priscilla, I'm so glad we didn't have Twitter back then when we took them off the aircraft. And the Munchie Mix is currently off the aircraft, right, and the feedback that we've received. But that has been, I think it's just another signature move of the company. It's now the basket, and you see a lot of airlines replicating that. And take what you want. And we've added on additional food product for longer hauls. But the follow-up, I think, is really interesting as well, and it's you've got to have the team working together to, whatever it might be, what's the mission? Tidy the aircraft. And tidy the aircraft, clean the aircraft, present the aircraft. How do you drive efficiency? And we're not perfect. When I see other airline captains or other airline pursers, senior flight attendants, who clean our airplane, in addition to our own crew members cleaning our aircraft because we gave them a ride home from, say, Logan to Fort Myers, but they just came in from London or Paris or wherever it might be. It blows my mind. And when you kind of ask why they do it, it's first of all, I just really appreciate the ride home. But second of all, at my company, I can't do it because the work rules in the union agreements don't allow me to do it. And it's amazing. And this isn't an anti-union comment. We are non-union at JetBlue. I respect third-party representation in the model for where it works. And it definitely, you have to work collaboratively. But when you see a 30-year captain at a network airline helping to clean our airplane, and also somewhere along the line, there's usually a bottle of wine or champagne that came off their premium airplane coming across the North Atlantic to say thank you to our crew. It's this contrarian model doing things differently. And I think at the end of the day, I'll close with this, Priscilla. Orientation last week down in Orlando, JetBlue University, 147 new crew members. I had the opportunity to welcome the group, which I usually do. If not me, it's Rob Marister, our COO at this point in time. And we're talking about our strategy and building the brand. And the brand is all of us together. It's not pilots separate from flight attendants, separate from technicians, separate from ground operations. It's not unlike, I think, the table that Ian has brought here today, working together as a team, because otherwise we're going to fail. History books will indicate that, so appreciate the question. Back to Twitter.
I'll tell you, we have lots of questions coming in on Twitter and Facebook.
They're waking up, right?
Yeah. I'm going to go through a few that are asking for personal help finding their luggage to get to one of the ones.
Ian, your cell phone number is? Right, okay.
Why doesn't JetBlue offer a first class section? Has that been a successful model for you?
So appreciate that question. There's we have a even more space, which amazing is the coach seat on a JetBlue A320 on this aircraft right here, 34 inches of pitch, the distance between equal areas of a row. On a normal aircraft in the United States, it's 32 inches, maybe 33, sometimes 31, depends on the emergency row. We put in place, actually Marty's team put in place a section called Even More. It's now space. It was Even More legroom. It's the Even More product. Do you know what that is? People are paying us north of $100 million this year. This is for an enhancement. The core product is solid. The enhancement as opposed to the nickel and diming. And so we think that we look at how do you pay for an enhancement as opposed to your first bag or swiping for the TV. That's part of the core product. From a first class perspective or doing things differently, I would never say never, right? Because we know that what got us here won't get us there. And so we started as an airline that was an hour to Buffalo or maybe 3 hours down to Fort Myers, but we're now 6.5 hours out to San Francisco as an example. And those are markets where people will pay a premium for more space, or they're flying on the red eye overnight and they want some kind of a premium, something above Even More. So I would never rule it out. And in fact, I'm pretty excited about how the team looks at seating on the 320, the 321, as well as the 190. And again, you have to listen to your customers. What do they want? What are they going to pay for? Right? As opposed to don't ask them and nickel and dime them. And that's why people can't stand this industry. Right? It's just, I'm your most loyal customer. I book late, you pay me the most, and I'm in the middle seat. Right? Because I couldn't get an upgrade. So I'm pretty excited about what's going to happen with the in-flight experience. We don't overbook, and every time we look at it, what do you do with 6 people who aren't going to get to where they're going on the day before Thanksgiving because the company was greedy and overbooked? What are you going to do with them? You give them a $400 certificate and hope they come back, right? Well, you know what really happens. Yeah, so anyway, we'll keep looking at the future there. I appreciate that. Great, thank you.
Morning.
Morning.
I'm Larry Buxbaum.
Hi, Larry.
This is, class of 78.
Great.
First off, I'm flying tomorrow to San Francisco on JetBlue.
That's awesome.
My question is, you talked about labor being one of the critical issues. You talked about, I guess, retention, but how about recruitment from schools like Northeastern?
Yeah, Larry, really appreciate it. It's a, are you in an even more seat, by the way? They're for sale for $75. At the door, right at the door. That's what Joseph said. It's a, by the way, there's going to be some headwinds tomorrow, so the flight, right, John, is going to be a little bit longer, right, Captain? A little bit longer heading out west. There's, you know, when we take a look at, you know, the interesting opportunities that, you know, really might be out there, it's exciting when, I don't know, we look at the capabilities of really what we can be doing. And the talent management, I mean, at its heart, I almost get emotional when I think about talent management. We added 800 new jobs this year. And we'll have 100,000 people apply at JetBlue this year. And our challenge is, how do we really try to calibrate with focus the right talent into the company? And so we're using technology, we're using peer hiring, we're using different, you know, different best practices that are out there. But I mean, at the heart, we talk about a contrarian financial model or product model. If the human capital's not right, it's just not going to work long term. It's not going to be optimized. And so when we were talking earlier today about things like the New York City school system, which has now improved to a 60% graduation rate. When we talk about the New York City school system, which has improved to 40% of 8th graders reading at an 8th grade level. Ian, you and I, home's Detroit, and the graduation rate is 37%. And that's not in 4 years, that's the graduation rate. So when we think about what are these practices, these models that we can put into place, these partnerships, and Joseph and I were talking about the co-op partnership and between Northeastern and JetBlue and what can we do with each other to maybe optimize some of the experiences. I'm really excited about that because it's when you started to share your IBM story and going worldwide as we talk about what we're attempting to do, but understanding really the culture of the world, that talent management for the frontline position, for the back office position as well, the support positions, to me, it's going to make or break our company. And so, Larry, I think about even coming up today, I think we took away several different follow-ups, but one is to bring a team back up here with our people department, spending time with counterparts here at Northeastern. How do we maybe provide co-op opportunities, the ability to spend time at Logan with our team? Maybe it's our team coming in to speak to different classes. And you start to do more and more of this, and the word of mouth regarding JetBlue or the word of mouth regarding Northeastern continues. And I just think it's an equation where 2 + 2 = 6. So I really appreciate you asking the question. As we kind of close in on the top of the hour, it's maybe a good one to close on as well, because really, at the end of the day, it's the heart of what's important. So Larry, thanks so much for the question. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dave, before you leave, I want to amend my offer. I think you are capable of being the CEO of JetBlue and the president of Northeastern University. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm relinquishing my job.
Oh, that's it.
And here it is. Congratulations, you have all my headaches.
I feel like Lee Corso on ESPN on Saturdays. Not so fast, Not so right? fast. You're going to get one too.
Great.
That's great.
Thank you. Can I fly for free now?
Plus taxes.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.